call this meeting to order at 6:02 p.m. I'd like to announce that this meeting is being recorded. I'll wait for a second.
Hello. It is in fact being recorded. I'm actually just curious why there's like a transcript, a closed captioning transcript of what we're saying, and I'm not seeing one right now. It might be just because I'm just gonna check the audio.
Okay. May I have a roll call?
Dr. Aguilar?
Here.
Dr. Freeman?
Here.
Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the Chumash people who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Chumash elders, past, present, and future, who call this place Anasoyo, the land that Isla Vista sits upon, their home. We're proud to continue the tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We thank the Chumash community for their stewardship and support, and we look forward to strengthening our ties as we continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding. This time, I'd like to move on to the public comment period. Is there any public comment at this time? All right, I see no public comments, so I'll move on to our discussion action items. We have 3.1, our parking study update.
Turn it over to Emma.
Yes.
All right, I'll take it away then. Let me just share my screen here. Oh, can you enable it?
Oh, yeah.
All right, there we go. All right, so just going to run through the latest project updates on the parking study. Where we're at right now is we've completed our draft of the existing conditions and parking needs assessment, and we're just going through and incorporating the feedback into those. As you know, we wrapped up our online parking survey back in January and had over 1,200 responses. So that was great. And those responses are included within the report. We also completed our annual parking data collection effort back in March, and I'll share the latest results from that here shortly. And then we've done quite a bit of stakeholder outreach at this point, and you can see over on the right here, there's quite a few stakeholder groups that we've been meeting with throughout the project. And we've had a chance to just this past mid-May, our team was on site for a town hall meeting and several focus group meetings. And so I'll be able to share some preliminary results from the feedback we received on the draft recommendations. We also have basically digitized the worksheets that were at the town hall, and we'll be launching an online version of those here this week for folks that were not able to attend in person. They'll have a chance to see the presentation virtually. We have a recording that'll go along with that, and they'll be able to fill out the worksheet online and provide additional feedback. So that'll all feed into the draft process, and we plan to draft the parking action plan over the summer, and then our goal is to bring the plan back for final adoption, hopefully in the fall. Here are the latest results for March. So we had basically an average occupancy for on-street parking of 100%, but at the 5 a.m. and 8 p.m. rounds, we actually exceeded 100%, largely due to the illegal parking, where you can see the blocks that exceed 100% capacity. And so that's consistent with the other months that were evaluated while school's in session. And now I'm going to run through some of the draft concepts, and these were the same ones that were presented at the town hall and the different focus group meetings most recently in May. The first topic to cover is compliance. And so we're really excited about the opportunity for the Community Services District to establish their own compliance program or parking enforcement operation. Really, the intent would be to start by enforcing the policies as they are today and kind of see where the problems pop up and be able to make more effective policy decisions from there with that consistent coverage and compliance. And while it is about compliance and enforcement, it's not about going out and blanketing IV with a bunch of parking tickets. Really, the intent is we want to make it easy for people to follow the rules and it's intended to be a customer service oriented program that's really focused on education. And so one of the concepts is this parking ambassador model, where it's really about education and telling people where we want them to park, how they can be in compliance. There would likely be a warning notice campaign that would go along with it to make it really clear for folks. Another idea is this concept of space delineators or T-marks, especially in your driveways, just making sure that people know that they cannot park right up to that edge. We want to make sure there's enough space for that ingress and egress into the driveways and making that clear along with enforcement. And then in terms of the technology, it's really becoming the industry standard. Most agencies are leveraging license plate recognition technology or LPR, along with citation issuance device handhelds. And that just really introduces a lot of automations and efficiency to help the overall operation. And the added benefit of using LPR for enforcement is you also can leverage that ongoing data, anonymize it, and then leverage that for ongoing parking utilization metrics. And that's actually how we conducted the annual study here. And so there would be an opportunity for more ongoing numbers just to evaluate how different policy decisions impact parking utilization over time. In terms of the safety enhancements, it was identified that emergency vehicle access can be a concern. And one of the ideas is potentially eliminating parking either on one or both sides of the street where that emergency vehicle access is particularly impacted. Consistent parking enforcement also ties into the overall aspect of safety because that will help address things like the double parking or the blocked sidewalks and red curb violations. So it's all a piece of that puzzle. We know that special events are quite impactful in Isla Vista. And so being able to come up with a special event parking management plan to really handle those exceptional times. Vehicle habitation came up quite a bit in the community feedback as a concern. And we know that while this isn't a parking management issue alone, it is something that does impact parking utilization and management. And so tying that into the overall plan. And then there's also quite a few opportunities for pedestrian and cyclist improvements that could enhance safety. And those are covered in more detail in the separate mobility study, but definitely play a part in terms of how do we get people to maybe use their cars less often and give up their cars. And so focusing on different mobility enhancements is an important piece of this. In terms of congestion mitigation, we know there's just an extreme amount of congestion. And so this is a car ownership problem, but also not everyone's using their car on a regular basis. So we need to get really creative about how we can discourage car ownership. And I just want to highlight too, for those who are not familiar, there was statewide legislation passed recently, the daylighting legislation that goes into effect in 2025. And we're estimating that there will be a reduction of basically 157 on-street parking spaces because the legislation basically designates that you cannot park within 20 feet of an intersection to provide for better sightlines and visibility. But that will put a further squeeze on the already impacted parking capacity. And so we really need to try to move the needle, and there's no perfect solution for this. It's going to be a combination of a number of strategies. And I think it'll be a collaborative effort focusing on mobility options, collaborating with property owners, the university. A lot of community members brought up the idea of a remote parking location that maybe could be used by people that don't need their car on a regular basis. And if they would be willing to store their car off-site, if it's accessible by some sort of circulator shuttle, knowing that that would have to be like a safe and secure location. So there are some challenges and factors with that. And then the opportunity for a residential permit parking program is another thing that could help mitigate that on-street congestion. Knowing that a lot of California agencies already have this in place. There are different ways to structure the program, and we would have to be mindful of the fact that there are a lot of folks living in a household. And so trying to come up with what is that right size parking cap on the number of permits per household and how that would function, knowing that we would need to have like a low income permit option and be mindful of coastal access and how we structure this program as well. And then any opportunity to explore shared parking agreements is worthwhile as well if there are locations that are privately owned that have parking capacity that's maybe underutilized at certain days or times. Being able to leverage that and open that up for permit parking or public parking. It's just a great way to introduce more parking supply without having to build it, which is extremely expensive. And there's not a lot of space. And then in the long term, definitely exploring the opportunity for something like tolling or congestion pricing is something that we're thinking of building into the plan, knowing that this is not common in the US at this point, although it has been done in other areas of Europe. But this is more of like a cutting edge opportunity that we would want to explore the feasibility of, knowing that there are just a opportunity. In terms of commercial access, we know the importance of time limit management, making sure that you have that consistent turnover. With loading zones, some agencies designate them specifically as active loading and unloading only, and really just making sure that they're being utilized properly, which goes hand in hand with enforcement. There could be a need for additional short-term parking spaces as well, especially with the rise of food and merchandise deliveries and pickups. That can be a good opportunity to provide more convenient curbside access. The idea of overnight parking restrictions came up specifically for the commercial core, just to make sure that that area is completely cleared out for those really early morning needs for commercial access. And then whatever we do, we really do need to be mindful of making sure that the employees of the commercial area have a way to access their jobs. And so ideally, if they live close enough, being able to promote alternative modes of transportation, but for those who have to drive, ideally being able to designate some sort of off-street permit parking location that's affordable and convenient enough, but still prioritizes that on-street parking access for customers, which is the most convenient. In terms of environmental protection, there's an opportunity to install more electric vehicle charging stations, just given the rise in adoption that we're seeing, and just anything we can do to incentivize the use of alternative mobility options, I think in collaboration with the mobility study is really key, because a big piece of parking management is making sure that we reduce congestion by reducing reliance on cars. And then there could be an opportunity to rethink how street sweeping regulations are applied in Isla Vista. There would definitely need to be a collaborative effort with a parking enforcement program, but a lot of agencies do designate specific days and times where cars have to be moved just to facilitate that block being cleaned right up to the curb. But I know the crew is doing the best they can, and they do their most thorough cleanings while school is out of session at this point. But there could be an opportunity from an environmental standpoint to enhance that overall approach. And then in terms of recreational and coastal access, so it was brought up that some time limits near parks throughout IV could be a benefit, just to provide for that turnover, and also just making sure that we do provide that access for park maintenance vehicles so they can get to and from those parks. Formalizing and regulating Camino Mallorca definitely came up quite a bit in our community engagement, and being able to look at different options and what might be feasible there. potentially, if we do establish some sort of residential permit parking program, when you think about coastal access, it's really a daytime access while the beaches are open. So there could be an option to apply the permit restrictions only overnight if that's what it'll take, knowing that whatever we propose will end up having to be approved by the Coastal Commission. So that's just something to consider, as well as paid parking at Goleta Beach, which a lot of coastal communities in California, when they have congestion at the beach, they do introduce paid parking as a way to kind of manage that parking congestion. And that could be something to consider for the longer term if it becomes an issue at Goleta Beach. And now here is just a preview of the worksheet results. So when we did the town hall in person, we received approximately 28 or 29 worksheets, and then several others emailed us a scanned copy of their worksheets. So this is just what we had so far as of last week. And like I said, we continue to receive more, and we are launching the online version of the worksheet. And so we'll be updating these figures, but I wanted to give you all a preview. And so in terms of the priority rankings from the 32 so far, you can see over on the left, these are the different objectives that were established for the parking management plan. And then for each of those, we basically ask people to rank what is your top priority, and they prioritize the different objectives. And so these are in order of the number of respondents that ranked that objective as their #1 priority. So far, it looks like improving compliance with parking policies was the most commonly top ranked objective. So we know that compliance and parking enforcement is definitely really key here, followed by mitigating parking congestion, which received 9 respondents that ranked that as their #1 priority, followed by enhancing safety, then environmental protection, and then improving commercial parking access and recreational and coastal access. Nobody ranked those as their #1 priority, but it's still an important piece of the overall solution. And then for each of these objectives, there were a number of associated strategies that were listed in the worksheet, and people were basically directed to check off which of those strategies they support. And so we basically included here a summary of which strategy option had the most support so far. So we're excited to see that the IVCSD compliance program was highly supported within that objective. The opportunity of working with UCSB to discourage on-campus students from bringing their cars, everyone supported that filled out the worksheet so far. Pedestrian and cyclist safety improvements were popular. Considering street sweeping parking regulations had quite a bit of support. Requiring active loading and unloading and short-term parking tied for first in that category. And then formalizing and regulating Camino Mallorca was the #1 for that recreational and coastal parking access category. So we'll continue to keep you updated as we get more results. And then just the next steps on the project. So like I said, we're going to be finalizing the existing conditions and needs assessment reports. We'll incorporate, I know there's more intercept surveying going on right now with the team. So we'll be incorporating the results of that into those reports as well. And the digital worksheet. We'll be outlining the draft recommendations next and the draft report. And then we're planning to regroup with our project steering committee, hopefully sometime in late June or early July, before we go and draft the report over the summer. And then we'll be returning with the parking action plan, and our goal is final adoption in the fall. And with that, here's our contact information and the project webpage. And I can wrap it up from there.
All right. Thank you very much for that update. Are there any board questions right now? Yes, Director Freeman.
I'm curious, sorry, I'm curious in the stakeholder meetings and other kinds of feedback process we've done, and people talk about compliance. Of course, there are many specific things that we're looking at doing with compliance, and I'm curious how much has either been described or then how much feedback we've gotten on that 72-hour compliance program is something that historically, when I've heard people talk about it, they usually talk about it with respect to people who are essentially like camping out in certain locations and then the issues they have with that. But when we discovered during, at least I kind of remember us, the result of this, having kind of discovered during one of the meetings a couple months ago that it seemed like half of Isla Vista was out of compliance with that. That seems like it would be a drastic effect on the community and probably a very large immediate. I mean, we have as many parking ambassadors going out as we can, explaining the things, making certain there are a bunch of warnings, but it's gonna like when half of Isla Vista is out of compliance, it's gonna be brutal. And so I'm curious, like if there's any responses on that or any thoughts that maybe because maybe we need to like make a different version of that rule that balances the needs of the various people, and we should work with the county on that, or like what's his
State
thoughts?
law.
That one's a state law. I thought that was something that was only added for our streets and like a few other streets over there. What am I thinking of? Some oversized vehicles. That's what I'm thinking of.
I didn't know,
Okay.
yeah, Emily can go into the other parts, but it is a state.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, the 72 hours, that's across the board, but yeah, I mean, in terms of the
Be
compliance program, we did focus on, it's not just a 72-hour rule, it's really the compliance with all of the existing policies today. So I think people are most excited about addressing some of the more safety focused violations like red curbs or blocked driveways, parking on the sidewalk and whatnot. And so that's really going to be the priority. And then the 72-hour rule, we would still need to work through the details of how that specifically would be handled in IV, but I do know in a lot of other California communities, it's largely complaint-based, especially in a residential area. So just we want to be mindful of the fact that people don't always have another option of where they can park. And so until we have something designated, it would need to be definitely a balanced approach.
Thank you for your careful consideration and the information correcting my misunderstanding and confusion.
Thanks for that question, Director Freeman. I basically have the same question, but with regards to street sweeping. I'm wondering if there was conversation or responses that reflected like the complexity of having one whole street empty on any given day in Isla Vista. Just feels, I mean, we talk about it with other things like one day a year festivals that happen and how challenging it is. And so I'm considering like how possible do we think this actually is, or would it look way different than what I'm imagining?
Yeah, so we have been including the Goleta West Sanitary District in a lot of our conversations, and we do know that it is an enforcement challenge, but also to your point, a lot of communities, you hear about the big shuffle that happened. It's like that musical chairs where you're just having to move those cars around, and so wanting to be mindful of that aspect, especially given the amount of congestion. But typically you would have the hours posted for maybe just 1 hour of time that they can't park on one day of the week, and it could alternate every other week or something like that, where really it's intended for them to be able to move their car out of the way. The street sweeper can go down and do their cleaning, and then they could repark on that street, and it wouldn't necessarily be that they can't park there all day long. But yeah, it's definitely a complex thing to tackle.
Got it. Thank you. There's no further board questions. I'll ask if there's any public comment or questions at this time.
No.
All right, we have no public comment or questions at this time, so
I turned in what I was given.
is there any board commentary
Just one, right?
this time? Yes, Director Freeman.
I personally have a difficult time taking a survey with 32 results that weren't like, at least, I mean, like it's not like we like randomly drafted 32 people by a very particularly powerful random process at all, seriously, because it's, I mean, like that's the kind of thing where it's like you tell a few of your friends to come in and you can massively like change the the swing results. So
We're gonna send it out digitally now.
Okay.
There's a digital version going out.
Yeah, I definitely would hope for more responses, but also I believe that we had 50 or 60 attendees
50 at town hall.
at the town hall. and then
More at the focus.
and then
groups.
more with
Some
the focus
people just
groups.
didn't turn it in.
Got it. So 32 out of like 50 hand delivered feels like a pretty good response rate. But definitely always would enjoy more.
Took a long time.
To do the worksheet.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if you want to really think about it. I took a long time.
We
No, I
I
appreciate
think
you
it's
taking time.
possible to get like interesting qualitative feedback and understanding from such a thing, but as far as like looking at percentages, numbers and doing things like that with 32%, so with 32 respondents, it's just like I don't even like to try to let that kind of number come into my head because I'm just like it's gonna be
And
lost.
that included the stakeholder meetings
Yeah.
and the town hall,
Yeah,
just 32.
yeah.
Wow.
But we had maybe like 70 people or more throughout the day. But we had 1,200 people fill out the original survey.
Yes.
Yeah, remember there was another survey that had like a lot of people. So that was
That's
like
where
at
all the
least,
ideas
like-
came from. Like people
Yeah.
registering their complaints or support for things. But I don't think we heard any complaints against the compliance program, for example, at any of the focus groups or town hall. No one said, maybe some people were like, that's not my favorite thing, but no one said, absolutely not.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you for this update. Thank you to the Dixon team. Also, thank you for coming in person and getting so much work done with Isla Vistans. It was really great. Now move on to our future meeting dates and future agenda items. The next meeting of the parking committee will be on Tuesday, July 2nd on Zoom and at the community room right here, 970 Embarcadero Del Mar, Isla Vista, California. And with that, I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.